climate conference in Milan have won a seat at the table, meeting with Italy's Prime Minister Mario Draghi.
There is no planet B.
Their audience with a G7 leader comes 2 days after Thunberg's scathing criticism that politicians want.
And I predict ministers will, when they end this pre-COP, will promise to build back better, to deal with the climate crisis and the crisis of poverty and inequality. But that will, unfortunately, just blah, 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 blah.
But are young people being naive in their demands?
Of course they're not being naive. Look, the global scientists have issued a code red for humanity. They've said that the window to act is rapidly closing. The UN itself has said the current proposals on the table to cut emissions are simply too weak and unfair. The richest countries need to cut their emissions by 2030 to prevent a breach of the critical 1.5 degree guardrail. Yeah, they're kicking action down the road to 2050 and they're leaving us on a course for 3 degrees warming. The UN said we need at least $1.5 trillion a year for a global Green New Deal so you can tackle climate, and it's not far off what is needed. Rich countries are still dragging their heels. We've had lots of warm words, but climate science tells us winning slowly is the same as losing, and we're not seeing either the urgency, we're not seeing the ambition, and we're not seeing the fairness from rich countries, and they really need to step up and take the action that is needed. We need to transform our energy systems, transform our food systems. We need to tackle global inequality. We're in the midst of a COVID pandemic, which has further exposed all of the inequalities and injustices that exist within societies and between rich and poorer countries. But it doesn't have to be like this. We know what needs to be done. We have the policies we have the technology. What is lacking is the political will.
Really good to talk to you. So many thanks indeed. That's a run at that in London. We'll get a weather update next to you on the news hour. Then, Facebook questioned by Congress again. It's been revealed that the company knows the damage it does to young people's mental health. Bond is back on the big screen, but can the new 007 film help to revive an industry battered by the coronavirus pandemic? Then in sport, the golf championship where power rather than precision is the order of the day.
It's got hot again in Iraq, a few degrees above average, and that hot air is coming down through Kuwait, a bit of Shamal coming down towards the Gulf States, particularly Qatar. But this is making it more relevant. A tropical storm, the remnants of which Gulen probably be renamed Gulen to get some strength again. Either way, it's going to be a very wet case for southern Pakistan, including Karachi. By the time it gets to the end of Saturday, it looks like it'll be in the Gulf of Oman. What it does after that, certainly can't be sure of it, but it looks like it may well come across into just touching the UAE and certainly touching Oman. That'll be a very wet event, obviously flooding, might be windy as well. That's gone through. This is still quite a cold breeze across the Caspian and the Black Sea, down across the Aegean, the Bosphorus and the Aegean, so that part of Turkey will be feeling cooler. All going around what is rather a warm dome here, back down at 44, in Kuwait at 45. These are upper warm areas, 7 degrees above average, so it's actually warmed up again in the last week. In tropical Africa, we still got the edge effects of the monsoon, a few showers in Somalia, but the bigger ones quite clearly are inland.
As hospitals and clinics across Asia battle COVID-19, mountains of medical waste are piling up. 101 East investigates this dangerous pandemic fallout. On Al Jazeera.
We understand the differences and similarities of cultures across the world. So no matter how you take it, Al Jazeera will bring you the news and current affairs that matter to you. Al Jazeera.
Discarded clothes from rich nations are funneled through charities and sold to impoverished nations on a
That is a lot.
A massive industry sifts through the unwanted garments to resell to some of the world's poorest inhabitants. But much of what arrives is unfit for purpose and is fueling an environmental catastrophe. people in power travels to Ghana to uncover the dirty secret behind the world's fashion addiction. Dead white man's clothes on Al Jazeera.
Hello again, it's good to have you with us. Adrian Finnegan here with the news out from Al Jazeera. The headlines: pro-democracy protesters in Sudan have gathered in the capital to condemn the recent coup attempt. The government's military and civilian partners have traded accusations following last week's incident. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been sentenced to a year of house arrest for corruption. Sarkozy was found guilty of illegal campaign financing in his failed 2012 re-election bid.
Facebook's own internal research on what this product is doing to young people. Facebook obviously owns Instagram. And here are just some of the headlines from their own research. We make body image issues worse for 1 in 3 teen girls. 1 in 5 say Instagram makes them feel worse about themselves. And teens who struggle with mental health say Instagram makes it worse. It went on to say that teens who reported feeling suicidal, 13% in Britain, 6% in America, traced it to Instagram. Now, I've covered a lot of congressional hearings in my time here in Washington. I can't recall one that was so across the board hammering on this witness. Her name is Antigone Davis. She's the head of global security for Facebook. It was every single senator launching question after question. And she said, look, the data's taken out of context. It's not meant to be cause and effect, basically. But really, you saw questions from Senator Ted Cruz, who asked point blank, do you have a number of how many people have killed themselves, how many kids have killed themselves because of your product? She said, obviously, that research would take a very long time. No, she didn't have that number. So absolutely hammered on Capitol Hill. And it's probably going to get worse for them, at least in the short term, because they have another hearing scheduled for next week. An internal whistleblower testifying before the Senate, and one of the senators said they have thousands of internal documents from the company. So really seeing a big push to regulate social media companies, especially when it comes to teenagers.
Many thanks. Al Jazeera's Paddy Culhane live on Capitol Hill. Let's speak to Carl Taylor in London. He's a project director at the Real Facebook Oversight Board and Advocacy Group. Carl, good to have you with us. Any surprise that Facebook has found in its own research that Instagram is bad for teenagers' mental health?
I mean, quite frankly, I think there's no surprise at all here. And I think that, for a lot of people, they probably saw this reporting in the Wall Street Journal and thought, yeah, that sounds about right. And that's sort of where we are with these tech companies now. We very much believe they're causing as much harm as we're learning, and yet there is still no sense of responsibility or real duty of care around these issues.
Do you think many people understand that Facebook and Instagram, they exist purely to sell advertising? Why would Facebook want to start an Instagram app for kids? Surely it's not allowed to advertise to kids, is it?
Well, this is a really great point, and I think it's one that we all forget, because tech has spent the last 20 years telling us they're different. Don't be evil, we're connecting people. At the root of it, these are for-profit businesses trying to maximize returns for shareholders. They are ad businesses, as you said, and users are not their customer. Users are their product. They are selling you your eyeballs to advertisers, and what they want to do is keep you on as long as possible. And what they see in tweens, as they said, is a huge growth market. More eyeballs means, we look at tobacco and cigarettes, right? I mean, tobacco companies knew for years that cigarettes caused cancer. And yet they didn't admit that or really put it out in the public domain, because if people thought cigarettes caused cancer, they wouldn't buy their product. Let's assume on the baseline that these companies are only going to act in their own financial interest, and then regulate them as such.
All right, so how do you start with the regulation? Where do you start?
Well, it's the crux of this is the business model, right? We've got to make it so that collecting massive amounts of data on people to target ads to them doesn't pay. They should not be profiting from young girls feeling terrible about themselves. And just as an example, so in Facebook's own blog post that they posted in response to this, they said, oh, it's only 1% of girls who have suicidal thoughts because of Instagram. Only 1%? I mean, this is seriously surreal, right? I mean, if 1% of all coffees sold at Starbucks were poisonous and made people sick or ill, or they died from them, Starbucks would be closed and we would be regulating and investigating. You know, we need to treat this the same way. This is a public health crisis, and we are simply not broaching the topic. And so regulation starts with admitting the basics. These are for-profit companies that are harming society.
What about the algorithms? I'll tell you why I asked that. For some reason, Facebook, just in the last few days, has decided that I will be interested in online gambling. It is bombarding me, for some reason, with adverts for online gambling companies. What if I was a problem gambler?
Exactly, and they're built on preying on the problem gambler, right? They're built on preying on the young girl who is struggling with their body issues. The algorithm is the crux of this, and this is what they say is their secret sauce. We couldn't possibly, open this up. But we have to remember that algorithms are designed by people, and algorithms learn from watching people's behavior. So cracking open the algorithms and saying you can no longer optimize your algorithm for things that hurt people and society. I mean, just in the hearing today, Senator Blumenthal said that someone in his office set up an Instagram account as if they were a 13-year-old girl to see what happened, and within 24 hours, all of the algorithmic recommendations of people to follow, accounts to look at, were built around eating disorders and body image. So we know by design this is the goal. Let's force them to design another way. And if they can't make money, if they can't survive in the marketplace with that type of agenda and that focus, then they shouldn't be playing in the marketplace.
Really good to talk to you, Carl. Many thanks indeed. Carl Taylor there in London.
Thanks for having me.
Let's return to our top story. Ethiopia expelling 7 senior UN officials, accusing them of meddling in its internal affairs. Our diplomatic editor James Bay is with us live from the United Nations. James, what's the UN saying about this?
Well, the UN has issued a statement directly from the Secretary-General saying he is shocked by this news and saying that they will engage with the government of Ethiopia with the expectation that the concerned UN staff will be allowed to continue their important work. So they clearly have not given up on allowing these staff to stay. There are 7 staff here, 6 of them are humanitarian workers. Of those, one of them works for UNICEF, the other work for the UN Secretariat, and they're in very top positions trying to deal with getting humanitarian aid across the country, particularly to Tigray. One of the other officials, the other one, is one of the top officials in the Human Rights Office. Remember, the Human Rights Office has been doing work with the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, and they're supposed to publish very soon a report on the situation in Tigray. The concern is not just confined to the office of the Secretary-General, though. The UN Security Council has been meeting on a different matter. They've just come up with a compromise resolution on Libya in the last few minutes, and on the way in I spoke to ambassadors, and it's clear the Security Council very unhappy by what's happened. I spoke to the French ambassador, to the UK ambassador, and to the ambassador of Ireland, currently the president of the Security Council. Now it's the end of the month and the beginning of the month, obviously tomorrow, the 1st of October, so a different president takes over in Kenya, but it's pretty clear from the outgoing president, the Irish president, that there will be a meeting very soon, quite possibly in the next 24 hours, of the Security Council to discuss this important, and I think for the Security Council, the ones I've spoken to, very worrying development.
All right, James, many thanks indeed. In the last few minutes, the White House, according to the Reuters news agency, says that it's deeply concerned by the Ethiopian actions hampering humanitarian operations. It says it will not hesitate to use sanctions against those who obstruct humanitarian efforts in Ethiopia. Now, the US and Russia have held another round of strategic talks in Switzerland. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman led the US delegation at the Geneva gathering. It was organized to ease tension between the world's 2 largest nuclear powers. In a joint statement, the 2 sides said the meeting was intensive and substantive. Haiti has postponed elections scheduled for November despite pressure from the international community. It's the fourth time the election has been cancelled. Prime Minister Ariel Henry says that he'll set a new date early next year. With growing instability, many people there say that security is their main concern. Al Jazeera's Andy Gallagher reports.
This is a nation without a functioning government. Gang violence is so prevalent that people are forced to hide. Many are fearful of kidnappings in neighborhoods where gangs appear to have total control.
The state is going from bad to worse. The situation of the people is worsening. It's becoming overwhelming for us Haitians. There is no hope for us, especially the young people.
Adding to the sense of insecurity is yet another painstaking recovery from an earthquake in August that claimed over 2,000 lives. Prime Minister Ariel Henry is now under intense pressure to hold elections and rebuild the legislature. But that won't happen until sometime next year, after he dismissed Haiti's electoral council, saying they were too partisan.
The biggest challenge is that I have to face the challenge of mistrust. People don't believe what is being said. We have very specific objectives to hold elections.
Plans are now in place to hold the referendum on changes to the constitution, with the hope that a general election will soon follow.
We can't talk about elections when we have armed groups all around the country. We can't talk about elections when we have political prisoners. Elections are not possible when the majority of the people are dying from hunger.
Compounding the turmoil is the forced repatriation of Haitians from the US-Mexico border. Many resettled in other countries years ago and don't want to be back.
I have 5 children total. I left the country a while ago. I lost track of everything. I don't know what to do now. Because I have no money to pay for what I need to do, I don't know if I'm going to be stuck here or if I'll be able to make it back to Brazil.
It's not entirely clear what the US policy towards Haiti is. The Biden administration's been pushing for elections, but critics say their approach is vague. The US Special Envoy who resigned days ago said their policies are deeply flawed. Here in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis has issued an executive order making it harder for Haitians to resettle in this state. The investigation into the so-called mastermind behind July's assassination of President Jovenel Moïse is still ongoing. His death, the spark that set off a power struggle, leaving Haiti once again in a precarious position. Andy Gallagher, Al Jazeera.
Israeli forces have shot dead 3 Palestinians in separate incidents. A woman was killed near Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied East Jerusalem after allegedly trying to stab officers. A 22-year-old man